everyone. Welcome back for our design system journey show with Thais. Hello, Thais. How are
Hello,
you?
Mads. How's it
Yeah, I'm
going?
well. I'm well. We're working on different things, and as we discussed just before starting the show, this is just so overwhelming on different kind of topics. But yeah, that's really exciting. Working on different new stuff and new projects and so on. That's great.
Yeah, I think it's especially the case when you're working for like an innovative product like what we are.
For sure.
There's always a lot to do. It's a startup. That's just the reality of startups, but it's especially complex in the universe of design systems, I would say.
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely. Yeah, mainly because I don't know, there is a lot of things to invent. We're not just reproducing something. We're, I don't know, having the way for other people. So yeah,
Yeah, exactly. You're setting standards or like allowing for improvements in workflows. So it's I mean, in the end, our users are actually everybody else and ourselves a little bit. But yeah, it's funny to try to like incorporate everybody's needs and just
yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, so we didn't had an episode together for a long time, for weeks.
yeah.
And we're finally resuming it today, so that's great. So you have something in mind or not?
Yeah, I actually do.
You tell
Well,
me.
for the past sessions we've had, we started that mind map around design systems
Hmm.
to eventually, at the end of I don't know, sometime in these sessions, we come up with a roadmap
Hmm.
for any and every team that is working with setting up their environment. Um, and of course, we tend to go more in the direction of design because it's what a lot of the information I can bring, even though I ask you developers or questions about development here and there. But I was thinking this time, how about you walk me through setting up a new component from a developer's perspective? Um, I think we talked a lot in a broad aspect of design system, but then what about just actually getting dirty with it, hands on? And of course, we have some great videos already from you guys, you and George, setting up other people's design
Hmm.
systems with backlight. But I was wondering, like, just really let's focus on one component and take it from
Oh,
there.
yeah, great idea. Let's see what we can do with this. So, um, let me share my screen. So, this is backlight, and this is design system editor. Do you know this one? Um,
I actually do.
oh, for sure. So yeah, um, I like your idea because um, okay, to be honest, folks, we're working on a new feature in Backlight, which is a kind of onboarding process, helping you to understand the first features that you will be facing when working with Backlight for the first time. So it will cover different kind of things like creating a branch, adding a new component, editing component, review it, publishing it, and so on. Something like 10 or 12 steps. So it consists in really small videos showing you how it works and so on. So I made a fake design system named My Design System. And it helps me to screenshot the different parts and animate them after that video. So let's take this occasion to improve it a bit and had some few content in it, few components and or something like this. So this one is really empty right now. Like if we just created it almost from scratch. We just have an introduction page with a really simple content, simple text. We are starting with backlight, check the links, blah blah blah.
Yeah, cool.
We've got a few colors declared in a SAS file.
Okay.
So this is okay. This is interesting because when I'm starting to work on a new let's say new design system, but at first from developer perspective, it's more like a few set of components library, and that's all. Um, especially when you don't have um, an existing design that you could reuse and extract the values from. So you just have
Mm.
to, keep in and extracting it from the top of your head. So for this one, I just picked a few colors, and generally, um, the highlighting is not really great, but it's but
It's okay. I can see it quite
yeah,
well.
but trust me. So yeah,
Hmm.
generally, I declare a palette of colors, like light
Mm.
one, a dark one, and few colors really named by their style: blue one, green one, gray one, and so on.
Okay. And so, is there a reason why you would start your component library? Because at this point, it's not a design system yet until you start documenting on it. So, let's say you're just starting with your component library. Um, do you go first to the colors straight away, or is it something that you are doing right now because it's how we work within Backlight?
That's a great question. Um, in the past, I generally started by just putting the different elements in my final applications and starting to extract them, then starting to build a kind of layout to organize them in my views. And after that, I'm going to the painting part, which is just applying colors and font faces and so on.
Okay, so colors, you would actually do it after you already have some
Yeah,
components.
that's it. But when you are
Okay.
working on design systems, then you are working on the component outside of the application. So you don't have this layout, or the layout is a component inside your design system to organize the component together. So working um um I'm trying to change my mind, and change my point of view and trying to figure out, okay, I need to work on a specific component, like, I don't know, a button or something like this. So or header or something. So let's try to work on it in total isolation. It's a sandbox. It's totally independent of the context, and I'm trying to bring something in it. But it's not always that easy to do. But
Okay.
mm,
No, I think I get where you're going with this. And of course, because you already have this template in place and colors is the first item on the navigation, it was easy to go there. So it's just for me to understand, okay, maybe sometimes there is a scenario in which the developer would just extract things from a interface that they're already working on, and then by isolation of each of the things that they extracted, start defining the um, repeatability of it,
mm,
right? Turning into a
yeah,
component, and therefore, and later style it. So start thinking about colors and things like that.
yeah.
Okay, interesting. And another question on this point, then, how did you decide for these names on these colors?
That's a great question. I spent a lot of time trying to find the best way, for me at least, to name things, especially the tokens. And I finally found that a great way to do so is to start by really defining the low level components, like low level tokens with just named colors: blue, green, hot pink, Rebecca purple, things like that. And after that, I've got access to this really raw definitions of tokens. So I can start to make some kind of mapping between the different elements, saying, okay, now I can define my primary surface color, and this primary surface color is mapped to the blue color. So it's just kind of aliasing elements between them.
Does it help you visualize this tree of like connections between the
Yep,
colors?
it helps me to probably better think the way I'm defining them. Okay, I will show you something. Maybe
Yeah.
it will be interesting to understand it. I started a design system named a Wordle design system, which is a kind of
Mm.
re-implementing the worded game in a design system, so extracting all the components from the game
Yeah.
by itself and then trying to rebuild the game in a final application. Fun fact, when you dig into the original game code base, you will see that the creator did exactly that. There is a design system behind it, and he made web components to build it and so on. So I
Cool.
did exactly the same thing without having to dig into the code, and finally figured out that, oh, we did the same thing. Interesting. So so I defined it something like this, like for let's say the keyboard. So I have my keyboard, and my keyboard is composed of different key groups that are my rows in my keyboard, and different keys that are just my keys on my keyboard. So my keyboard is just a composition of different rows, and each rows is a composition of different keys. So
I see.
if I take a key.
You broke down the keys individually, yeah?
Exactly. So I can remap
And then the
everything as
row.
I want just by
Yeah.
adding some kind of modifiers or not, or I
Mm.
can rearrange the layout. And if people want having both a QWERTY and an ASCII layout or something like this, so it's definitely doable because this is just a configuration stuff that is moving somewhere in the final application and not in the design system. The design system is totally agnostic of that. And so I've got this element on my keyboard. Let me go on it, which is the colored keys. So by default, they are neutral. But if the key is if the letter is not in the final word, then the key is in the dark version. If it's in the final word and at the right place, it's in green. Otherwise, it's in yellow. Um, so I needed a way to define a theme in my design system to have those different kind of colors, and probably at some point being able to give access to a dark theme or a high contrast or I don't know, different colors, because why not, after all. So I started to craft my colors, and I extracted my different colors. So I just have few colors in the palette. So I have a gray light, a gray dark, green, a yellow, a white, and a black, and that's all.
Mhm.
And then in my theme, I'm extracting and mapping those colors to what I really need for my application. So I have a light theme, and my light theme is using the gray dark color for the absent mapping, and the yellow for the present, the green for the correct, the gray light for the neutral, and so on.
So and so in here, it's pretty much like the design tokens, right?
Exactly. So at first, my colors are just exporting like kind of row tokens, something like this, let's say.
Mhm.
And I have a first step in my theme where I map my colors from my design tokens into something more meaningful in terms of naming, something like kind of theme tokens. So I've got my light theme and my tokens for my light theme. Then I can build a theme by just mapping different kind of elements, saying, okay, in my application, I've got a color absent, which is when we are in the light theme, mapped to the light color absent. Same thing for the present, same thing, and so on and so on. So you could have a mapping that will be just moving from the light to dark to purple or high contrast or whatever you want, saying, okay, I just need in my final application to have a token, which is my application token, and my application token is a color absent mapped to something in my theme, which is a theme token.
And let me just make a comment in this because it's very interesting. Of course, when we talk about design systems, we think components and we think buttons, inputs, and things like that. But just this thought exercise that you've had to think about the ability to allow for a dark theme, I would say it's also heavily a design system activity. And of course, if we talk design tokens, then it's very clear design tokens are related to design system. But Not even just defining those tokens, even the thought process to get to this conclusion and to think about these names is like a very important part. And it came from your need of I have these keys, I have these colors in these
Mm.
keys, I need to get access to them. And you could have simply just done, hey, I have a light, a blue, a gray, and that's it. Oh, sorry, a green. You don't have a blues yet. Um, you could have listed it and just reused those things, and that's fine. But you're preventing or actually enabling future improvements already, or a long-lasting application in which you can simply change any color because you already assigned different terminology to their usage. So yeah, the process of getting to this conclusion is definitely interesting. I guess it can be done in partnership with a designer because in the end this could help me if I'm at the same time setting up my Figma library for the exact same application. We should talk about what conclusions you came to in this color, because maybe you would have, well, you said color correct, maybe I would have said color positive, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. And I totally agree with you. Um this is exactly why you need to communicate with your teammates working on the design and um, documentation, content, product, and so on. Because um, this is, to me, from the development perspective, this is exactly the difference between working on a components library and working on a design system. You know, your components library will probably have some kind of theming features, but that's all. And it's totally agnostic of what you are doing with those features and those behaviors in your components library. But when working on a design system, you have to make choices and you have to make some kind of decisions saying, okay, this color will be the positive one or the correct one or the neutral one, and so on at the application level. And then after that, at the component level. So we need to agree together on what it is and how it works. You know, in the stream with George, we had an episode with Scalig starting to work on his very own design system, and um, and the colors are named, you know, I don't know, kind of erratic way, you know, like yellow 100 or gold 2000 or something like that. And but because it's probably values extracted from, I don't know, a map or a collection of colors or something like this. So um, I'm not saying it's good or bad or the right way to do so or the wrong way, but the first thing George did was, okay, let me rename those colors just to have something, you know, more comprehensive, you know. And Katie said, in fact, if you can keep the names, so I could stay in sync with my designer. We didn't talk, and so he didn't ask me about the naming of the colors and so on. But if we choose to change a name at some point, we have to do it together because we are working on the same document and the same elements, and we need to be in sync at the moment.
Yeah. No, it's always a tough one because, of course, people, well, they don't want to rework anything that they've already done. So, yeah, that's the disadvantage. If you are starting a product only with developers, then sure, they will have a workflow that they agreed with, and then a designer joins in, then that designer is easier to adapt to something that exists. But if you have both disciplines starting at the same time, but not communicating frequently, you eventually will get these two separate
Yeah.
paths of yeah, different decisions made along the way that impacts the future of your
Mm.
application. But sorry, I made you or I cut your line of thought where you were going with the Wordle exercise.
Yeah.
So you built the light theme, and then you have another file I see there for
Yeah.
Wordle.scss.
And the Wordle as CSS is just the file that is gathering the different elements, like the font face, the different tokens, and the specific styles for each components. So um, and then after that declaring the theme and the default theme, which is right now just the light one, but I have in my plans to make a dark one and so on.
Cool.
Because the system is flexible enough now to allow it. So that's a
Nice.
great thing. And yeah, my idea was finally, so I've got my design tokens. That are the tokens coming from design side, so the colors and let's say and the font face and the spacing and so on.
Maybe let's use the word styles. Because that's not necessarily
You're
design,
right.
right? So
You're right. Okay, so there are okay. That's fine. No, that's really great. So okay, let's say it like that. We've got our design tokens, and our design tokens are composed by style tokens. Those tokens are raw values like definitions of colors. Then we've got some kind of theme mapping, which are the theme tokens, mapping the size token to a more comprehensive value. Then we've got the applications tokens that are exploiting the current theme values. So we are mapping the primary surface color to the light primary surface color because we are using the light theme. But with a simple switch, I could remap it to a dark one, and I don't have to change anything in my components and so on because they are not referencing the theme or the styles token, but only the application one.
okay, I see.
And then at the component level, I'm also using another declaration to map different kind of content. Like I'm declaring, where is it? Yeah, I'm redeclaring some kind of elements like some kind of specific colors if I prefer. So I had an extra level of flexibility by allowing the use of extra values at components level. So it's components tokens that are probably mapped to theme tokens or more probably applications tokens. So in certain case, if I need to override some value, I could do that at the component level without impacting the rest of the application. Because this is my main fear when working on something to decorrelate at some point is that won't I impact some component by moving a value at some point, which is probably shared between different kind of components. So by
Right.
refining it at the component level, I'm more confident in the way that I won't break anything by changing something just at component level.
Okay. And at this point, we are very much talking about styles only. I'm curious about the code side of these components because you defined that the key group, the key
Mhm.
keyboard in JavaScript, I
Yeah.
guess. Which technology did you use?
I based the component on solid.js, but they are exported as web components. So let's say they're web
Right.
components.
So you made those web components, and so from a developer's perspective, and I think this is more a philosophical question because you're now faced with two challenges. You have to make or to build the web component, make it work in terms of interaction and the usability in the application. But then you have to style the component, which you have to decide for the tokens and these levels that you're describing on
Mhm.
specificity of your declarations. So, philosophical question here. How much or which time do you rather spend on the web component side or on the styling side
Mhm.
from a design system perspective? Because, yeah, of course, if you're building an HTML page and you have to style it, like the impression I get from the developers that I've talked to is that they really don't like CSS. Nobody likes
No,
CSS.
nobody likes
It,
CSS.
so but from a design system
It's
perspective
wrong.
it might be a different feeling, right? Because you're actually having that there's a lot of systematic thinking that you have like these layer decisions that you're taking, the naming
Mhm.
convention. Is that more exciting than working on the app component side, like if you were to wait it out?
Mm, that's interesting. To be perfectly honest, I'm always excited working with CSS. So I'm probably not the best example,
You're a bit
yeah, in the
biased.
room, but No, the fact is, when you work at a component level, you are working on something. Um, okay, I will say something really simple. It's not necessarily simple in terms of logic and interactions because Thomas Almer, which is the core maintainer at the Lion design system, told me that they redid the button element 4 times because of accessibility issues. So accessibility is definitely hard, and working at the component level allow you to improve it and probably reshape it or revamp it from scratch 4 times if you need uh, to access this perfect level of accessibility you are targeting. So that's great. And maybe working on a single component, it's really hard. But generally, it's something not that complex. It's just a few small markup with probably some ternary operations to switch between different styles at some point, depending on the state of your component. So you probably won't deal with a hundred of different states for a single component, or it means that your application is probably not that well architectured because a single component don't have to handle that quantity of different states. So generally, it's relatively easy to just craft a simple mm, bunch of snippet of code, and then starting to add some kind of logic in it. And quickly, you are working on the styles and on the design of the component itself because hey, the markup is here and it's not that complex. This is not the most complex part. So yeah, you have to think a bit more on what you want to do, and because the design is reflecting what the component is and how it works and how it should visually give feedback to your end user and so on. You do have to deal with this design really early in the development process of your component.
So you can't ignore CSS forever,
No, definitely
basically.
not. Or at least
Nice.
you can't ignore styling because let's say for React components, there is a lot of libraries allow you to abstract the styles from CSS and to work with something more high level. But that's okay. You can work with CSS or you can work with an advanced library, but you will have to deal with the styles at some point and really quickly in the development process of your component.
Okay, interesting. And eventually, yeah, I guess when you're dealing with the styles is where if you don't have those designs ready in a file for you, you are as a developer will have to make those decisions. And but if you do have a designer in the team, you certainly would ask the designer, "Hey, what about this size? What about this color? What about this typography?" That kind of thing.
Yeah, and
Cool.
this is where documentation have a big part to play in the party because um, let's say I'm working on a new component and quickly I will wonder, okay, which kind of font I have to use, with kind of font size, spacing, colors, and they're finally all related to the tokens and the design tokens. So I will want to ask my designer about it, but my designer is probably not available right now. Maybe he didn't had enough time to start a new draft for the component in the design files. So I will have to improvise something, So I will have a look at the existing colors and font spaces and spacing and so on in my existing design system. And if the documentation isn't here, which one to pick? I will probably start to do something really crappy and really ugly and absolutely not consistent with the rest of the UI and the rest of the experience. So with the proper documentation related to the tokens, I could maybe pick not the best one, but at least something coherent and consistent with the rest of the application.
Right. Yeah. No, definitely. Cool. So we covered then, yeah, like the definitions of the component level in the well, I'm gonna say tokens that you are using for this key
Mhm.
example as an extra layer of defining, yeah, those specifications. And then we covered a little bit of, okay, so you, whatever the technology you're using, you built quickly here the logic behind this key. So from here, I think this gives me a very nice picture of, okay, how you go about thinking about your components. Um, Anything else you want to share on this side?
Mm, yeah, I did something that I'm really proud of. So I can show you. Um, the idea talking about this um, component tokens extra layer is something that to allow me to keep this kind of flexibility. I I finally have a state in my key which is neutral or right one or misplaced or absent in the final one. So this state is passed as a property in my key. So this is just a kind of configuration element. And rather than burning the final color in the component itself, I just redeclare tokens at the component level. So I declare the key color surface, and this key color surface is mapped at some point to a color dependent of the state at the application level. So my key, I, um, I won't be surprised at some point if we finally choose to change the color for the right key or the correct one or the absent one or not. I just have to remap a color in the size token and everything will cascade. And I'm
Nice.
pretty sure that this notion of cascading is really important. This is the C in the CSS, but this is also something that we see in the static side generators like Astro or 11T, the cascade of data from the top level of your replication to the most peculiar one at the component level is definitely something really powerful and really important. And you don't have to burn something at some point in your application. Everything should just depend of this cascade.
Cool. Very cool. There's no way that I can see that happening now, right?
Yeah, yes, you can in
Oh,
the stories directly. I I here I for the let's say the key correct, for example, I pass a state which is a correct state, which is just two, just because I'm lazy at some point, and because I'm passing that, I will have a remapping of the color. So if I go to my let's say key correct, if I inspect it in my browser, then okay, I'm gonna zoom in it because otherwise you won't see anything.
correct. I'm seeing just
Yeah.
like part of the top part of your screen.
Oh, whoa, that's fun.
Yeah, it completely ignores the
It
inspect
ignores the
tool actually.
inspector. Okay. Oh,
Aha,
that's interesting.
that's a shame.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
private information.
yeah,
Oh,
much extra information. So yeah, okay. So let's.
but
But
basically, if I
basically,
were to
okay,
inspect, I would
you
see
will
it.
see that
Yeah,
you've got a CSS custom properties that is a key surface color, which is mapped to the color, the app color correct, which is also mapped to green color in my palette. And
cool.
this cascade is what allow me to just declare different kind of colors and different kinds of tokens, and everything will work just smoothly without having to just worry about which one I have to use at some point and so on.
Really cool. We also have a person in the chat saying that they're a big fan of token layering and cascading.
Thanks.
I think it's catching on this fever.
Yeah,
Let's just layer everything.
yeah. Which is interesting at some point because this is give or take what the layer specification in CSS is trying to solve at some point, which is the way in CSS to abstract the specificity and just isolate some parts of your styling from the basic element, like I don't know, declaring some kind of variables to the layout, to the components, to the vendor size, and so on, that you can pile like in Photoshop. And you have those different layers in CSS, and you can just apply them and override them without having to worry about specificity and so on. So this notion of layering and in the cascade is a game changer.
Well, the most important thing is to like be very organized about it and document it all because let's say you set up all these amazing layers and it works beautifully, and then somebody else takes over the project and they just don't understand
Mhm.
it, then all that layering, all that effort will just go for nothing,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Hence documentation.
Yep, yep. Documentation is the most critical part.
And also, the same person mentioned that they use to encode the defaults slash best practices that can be broken open when you want to get more specific.
Yeah.
If that makes sense to you, because that doesn't make much sense to me.
Yeah, no, that's right. The fact that you're overriding a value with a component token at some point means that if this component token is missing, then you automatically fall back to the application token. So you're always sure that you won't broke anything just because,
Okay,
hey, if
you forgot to mention all
exactly,
overriding.
if
Yeah,
something is
got
missing,
it.
I could fall back to a default.
Cool. So maybe to just like wrap up this exercise and to summarize what I've seen so far, which is really cool. We started off with the idea of like if it's a bare bones design system. You showed me first the styles, the colors, and that is because the colors, well, it was how it was organized in the application, and we just clicked there first. But that opened up Pandora's box of like where do you start, component or styles? To which, of course, you mentioned, well, it depends. If you have a ready product or interface, then you're probably going to extract the elements that the repetitive elements you see in this interface, and then make components of it. Therefore, you would probably start with the coding of the components. But then you got excited to show me the other design system they worked on, which is based on a ready product, the Worldle. And in there, you showed me that, and just correct me if there's anything wrong I say, okay? Um, you were excited to show how you broke down the idea of the keyboard and how you specified the roles, the keys as like components within components as well, because you could just by simply changing properties,
Mhm.
I guess, reuse those different combinations. And finally, we got to the conversation about, well, the keys were ready, but now you needed different states of the keys in different colors, and how you would layer those styles to make it work and to be sustainable as well for future change in the style itself. That you could use a dark theme instead of a light theme that you initially started with. And I think that was pretty much the summary of it
Yeah,
all, right?
I think so. I think so. That's a great one. Thank you.
Cool. No, it's nice because then I can understand a little bit inside your
Mm.
head as you go about, yeah, putting together your design system. But of course, it kind of sounds, or you described mostly a component library and the styles around it. And of course, if we wanted to be more dedicated to the design system aspect of it, we would have to talk about when did you start documenting those informations,
Yeah.
right? And what about your designer? Do this, in this case me, do I have the same keys in my Figma? Which I don't. Hey, I want some. I want a Wordle Figma library as
Yeah.
well. But actually, this gives me an idea. I'm going to write down from the session of today these steps that you more or less described, and you have a blog post about the Wordle thing
I'm
as well,
preparing
right?
it. Yeah. Probably
Right.
probably a
So
series. dedicated
Cool.
to these different parts, starting with the notion of layering tokens and cascading tokens.
Cool. Yeah, because I think when you post that information and after this conversation, I can organize for myself a sort of a breakdown of step by
Yeah.
step that you went through on Wordle. And I could see if I would do the same in Figma, if that's the process I would go
Hmm.
about as a designer, because I had the same challenges. I need to make a screen design. And in order for it to be efficient in the future or to have other designers working with me, I should make components of it. And the components need to be structured well so that the idea of the roles and the
Hmm.
keys individually also makes sense for me to probably break it down like that. And then finally, I get to the styles, which I have to define as well. And hopefully, I could even think about the theming aspect of it, which is definitely something that the design tools are
Hmm.
not completely wired for. There's a lot of plugins that help with it, but it's something you have to really think extra from a design system perspective. And then I could make a parallel of like, hey, this is how a developer goes
Hmm.
about it, and this is how a designer goes about it. That's cool.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, there's a lot of content and a lot of different things that, as we said at first, we are just paving the way. So we have to invent a lot of things and imagine how to do some things or how to improve some different things, making things easier
Yeah.
for people to work together and so on. So
And especially and eventually automate a lot of this as well, right? If you have a layout or a template to base your decisions on, then making future decisions makes it easier because you already have a path
mhm,
to follow. Like, oh, if Y, then X, right? Like, you could just go like a programming language, if this, then
mhm.
that, else something else.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Yeah,
No, that's very interesting. I'm really excited to see your workflow, and how we ended up here talking about Wordle.
yeah, and
Do keep me updated on when you publish it,
for sure.
your blog posts, because I think, or your series of blog
Yeah,
posts, because it would be a nice exercise.
great. So yeah, for sure. We stay in touch, and yeah, probably see you for next episode next week.
Yes,
Hope
let's
so.
do it, and we'll see what we talk about next week. But yeah, maybe something more dedicated to like the actual code of the
Hmm?
components, like the logic
Yeah.
behind it. Because to me, yeah, components are so visual that I only see the borders, the typography, the radius. But it would be nice to understand like what are the challenges that you face with like the states
Mm,
and the logic that you have to think about in each component.
yeah, that's interesting. I've got a few things in mind. So yeah, definitely be great.
Cool.
Okay, cool.
I'll see you next
Yeah,
week then.
thank you very much, and see you next week. Bye bye.
Bye.